So I want you to picture the head of a major product at a top-tier AI lab. Let's just say Anthropic.
Okay.
This person ships code constantly.
Yeah.
We're talking 10, 20, maybe 30 pull requests a day.
Which is hyper-productive by literally any metric.
Right. But here is the data point that really stops you in your tracks. Since November 2025, this person has not written a single line of code by hand.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a paradox, right? Or maybe just really good delegation, but it's actually the new baseline.
Yeah.
We're talking about Boris Cherny, the head of Claude Code.
Exactly. And that is what we're doing a deep dive into today.
Mm-hmm.
We're unpacking a really candid conversation Boris had on Lenny's podcast. This was recorded just recently, early 2026, right around the one-year anniversary of Claude Code.
And what's fascinating here is that this isn't some speculative, futurist prediction.
No.
Boris is effectively reporting from the future. He's describing a post-coding reality that is already the day-to-day life inside these frontier labs.
And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out what that means for you. We want to know if that reality is coming for everyone else, not just the coders. Because Boris makes a pretty bold claim here. He says the era of the software engineer is effectively over.
Yeah.
And we are entering the era of the builder.
Which is a massive paradigm shift.
It is. So let's start with that 0 lines of code claim. Because to me, when I first read that, it sounds like he just stopped working and started managing people.
Right. But he insists he has literally never been more hands-on with the product.
So how does that work?
Well, that's the misconception. He isn't managing people, he's managing compute.
Okay.
Boris describes his morning routine, and it's not what you'd expect. He doesn't wake up and check email or Slack. He grabs his phone while he's still in bed and checks the status of 5 or 6 agents that he spun up the night before.
So he's basically running a sweatshop of AIs while he sleeps.
In a way, yeah. He checks the iOS app, reviews the pull requests that the agents generated overnight, and maybe he spots a logic error in the architecture. So he dictates a correction into his phone and just sends them back to work.
That's wild.
And he says he's actually never enjoyed coding more. Because the actual act of coding, the syntax, the boilerplate, setting up the environment, all of that is just gone.
He calls that the minutia. And honestly, as someone who has, spent hours debugging a dependency conflict that turned out to be a missing comma.
Oh, yeah. We all been there.
I totally get it. It's soul-crushing. But there is a difference between automating the boring stuff and replacing the job entirely.
Well, look at the output. The productivity per engineer at Anthropic is up 200%.
Wow.
We aren't just talking about writing a script a little faster. We are talking about one person doing the work of 3 senior engineers from, say, 2024.
And there was a stat from semi-analysis in the research, right? Something like 4% of all public GitHub commits are now authored by Claude Code.
That was the figure at the time of the recording, yes. And Boris makes a great point here. These adoption curves are never linear.
They're exponential.
Exactly. He sees that crossing 20% and eventually approaching 100% incredibly fast. I mean, we are already seeing those headlines. Remember that Spotify note?
Right, the one that said their best developers haven't written a line of raw code since December.
Yes. This is the S-curve of technology playing out in real time. We are moving from the software era to the agentic era.
Agentic.
Yeah, it's not just a chatbot anymore, it's an actor. It uses tools.
Okay, but let's push back on this for a second. If I'm listening to this and I'm running a dev team, or maybe I'm a junior dev trying to break into the industry, this sounds terrifying.
Sure.
Because if the AI writes 100% of the code, what is my value add?
Yeah.
Am I just a glorified prompt engineer now?
And this is exactly where the shift from software engineer to builder comes into play. Boris argues that the title software engineer implies that your value is tied to your ability to speak the machine's language.
Like knowing Python or Rust.
Right. But if the machine suddenly speaks English, that barrier just dissolves.
So the job becomes product manager.
Uh,
Because he used that term. And I have to say, most engineers I know would be deeply insulted to be called a PM.
oh, absolutely. It's a provocative relabeling. But he means product manager in the purest sense of the word. Someone who identifies what needs to be built.
Yeah.
In this new world, everyone is essentially a PM who codes. The barrier isn't the syntax anymore. The barrier is taste. It's judgment.
He gave that really interesting example of the internal culture at Anthropic right now. He called it a cross-discipline free-for-all.
Yes.
You've got the finance guy, the designer, the data scientist. They're all shipping production code.
Exactly. They aren't filing JIRA tickets and waiting for the engineering team to prioritize their requests. They just go and build it themselves.
Which is incredible.
And this touches on a concept Boris calls latent demand, which I think is really crucial to understanding why this adoption is happening so fast.
Latent demand, which is basically a polite way of saying people are desperate to solve their problems.
It is. Boris noticed something really weird happening internally. He saw non-engineers people, who by all accounts should be terrified of a command line interface, jumping into the terminal to use these tools.
And for anyone who lives in a GEO world, point and click, the terminal is hostile territory.
Very hostile.
You type the wrong command, you could wipe your hard drive. It is not where normal people go to have fun.
Right. It's a black screen with a blinking cursor. It's intimidating. Yet Boris tells the story about a data scientist, Brendan.
Oh yeah, Brendan.
He finds Brendan running complex SQL analysis right there in the terminal. Not because Brendan wanted to be a hacker, but because the utility of the AI agent living in that terminal was so high, he was willing to suffer through the interface.
The friction of the tool was high, but the value of the solution was higher. We saw examples of people doing crazy things, recovering wedding photos from corrupted hard drives,
Yep.
analyzing MRI data. There was even someone managing their tomato plant growth, all through a terminal agent.
That is latent demand in action. People have all these complex problems they want solved, but they previously didn't have the technical skills to build the solution.
Right.
And that observation is actually what led Anthropic to build Cowork.
Which brings us to the agent actually acting in the world. Because Cowork isn't just a chatbot that spits out code snippets for you to copy-paste.
No.
It's an agent that actually drives a browser and uses a computer like a human would.
This is that leap from software to agentic workflows we mentioned. Cowork can log into a website, click buttons, navigate a user interface, and just execute a task.
It's doing the clicking.
Exactly. Boris says he uses it to pay his parking tickets and cancel annoying subscriptions.
My absolute favorite use case was the nagging manager automation.
Oh, that was brilliant.
He has an agent scan a project management spreadsheet, identify all the engineers who haven't updated their status, and then it goes into Slack and messages them to annoy them into doing it.
It's so funny, but it really highlights the shift. The human work isn't sending the Slack message anymore. The human work is designing the system that ensures the message gets sent.
Right.
You become the architect of the workflow, not the cog inside the machine.
But this brings up a massive operational question for anyone listening. If you are building a company in this reality, the old playbooks for hiring and managing engineering teams have to be completely obsolete.
Oh, they're gone.
Boris laid out some rules for this, and honestly, rule number 1 sounds like a recipe for a full-blown mutiny.
You're talking about underfund and overtoken?
Yeah. Please explain to me how deliberately underfunding your team is a good business strategy.
I know, it's very counterintuitive, but it addresses the Jevons paradox of organizational behavior.
Okay, unpack that.
If you give a manager the budget for 10 headcounts, they're going to hire 10 people. Because in corporate America, that is how status is measured. How big is your team?
Right. More people equals more power.
Exactly. But if you hire 10 people, you inherently create communication overhead. You create bureaucracy. And crucially, those 10 people will default to working the way they always have.
Which is manually.
But if you starve the team of headcount,
You force them to innovate.
you force them to fundamentally change their operating model. If I give you the workload of 10 people, but only the budget to hire one person,
Yeah.
you literally cannot do it
You
manually.
burn out in a week.
Right. You have no choice but to automate with Claude. You become a power user, not because it's a cool new toy, but because you will drown if you don't.
And the overtoken part of that rule is the flip side. You starve them of people, but you give them an infinite budget for compute.
Boris was super specific about this. He advises leaders to not optimize for cost early on. Give your engineers unlimited tokens.
Which is expensive.
He mentions engineers spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on inference tokens alone.
I mean, a CFO looks at that cloud bill and has a literal heart attack.
Oh, absolutely. But Boris argues you have to look at the total cost of ownership.
Right, because if you compare that bill to the salary, the benefits, the equity, the office of 10 senior engineers in the Bay Area.
Exactly. $100,000 in compute is actually a bargain. You're replacing fixed, heavy labor costs with variable, scalable compute costs.
That makes a lot of sense when you frame it that way. Then there is rule number 2, which to me sounds like gambling. Build for the model 6 months out.
This definitely requires nerves of steel. Boris admitted that when they first started building Claude Code, the underlying model at the time, which was Claude 3, just wasn't good enough.
He said it could maybe write 20% of the code correctly?
Yeah, around 20%. And honestly, most startups would kill a project with the 20% success rate.
You pivot immediately.
But they bet on the exponential curve. They knew Opus 4 was coming down the pipeline, so they built the product architecture, assuming the intelligence would arrive to fill it.
They built a shell.
Right.
Right.
And when the new model finally dropped, the product suddenly just clicked. It worked.
So the lesson for the listener is, don't build for what the AI can do today, because if you do that, by the time you launch, you're building a legacy product.
Exactly. You have to skate to where the puck, or in this case, the intelligence, is going to be.
Which leads directly to rule number 3. Don't box in the model. And this is a direct reference to Rich Sutton's famous essay, The Bitter Lesson.
Yes. The bitter lesson. It's the idea that human engineers love to hard-code their own cleverness into software. We think we know best. But over a long enough timeline, general methods that leverage raw compute always beat specific, handcrafted human knowledge.
We want to tell the AI, okay, first do step A, then check variable B, then if that's true, do step C.
Right.
We create these rigid workflows because it makes us feel like we're in control.
And Boris says, don't do that. Stop micromanaging the agent. Give it the tools, give it the end goal, and let it figure out the path itself.
Because the agent might find a path you didn't even think of.
Exactly. He shared a case where Claude actually figured out how to use a batch tool to process files in a highly efficient way that the engineers hadn't explicitly taught it to do.
Wow.
If they had hard-coded the step-by-step workflow, that efficiency gain never happens. You really have to trust the agency of the agent.
Which, let's be honest, is easier said than done when the agent is racking up a massive AWS bill or suddenly hallucinating.
Very true.
Speaking of which, so people listening who are actually opening their terminals right now while we speak, what are the tactical moves? Because Boris dropped a few pro tips that I think are super actionable.
The most immediately useful one is definitely plan mode.
How does plan mode work?
So, usually with these agents, you type in a prompt like, build me a snake game, and hit enter, and it just starts vomiting code immediately.
Right.
And sometimes it goes down a rabbit hole that is totally wrong, and you have to stop it and rewind. Plan mode, which you trigger by hitting Shift and Tab twice in their terminal interface, forces the model to stop and think first.
It effectively says, hey, don't write any code yet. Tell me how you are going to solve this problem.
Exactly. It turns the AI into a senior engineer who is conducting a design review with you. You agree on the architecture and the steps before a single line of code is written.
That's incredibly smart.
Boris says he uses this for like 80% of his tasks now. It saves a massive amount of cleanup time later on.
And then there's the other tactic you mentioned, multi-clotting, which is just a really fun term for parallel processing.
It's the habit of never watching the cursor blink.
Right.
If you give the agent a complex task, don't sit there and watch it work. Open a new tab immediately and start the next task. Boris runs 3, 4, 5 streams at once.
So you're basically a dispatcher.
Yes. It changes your entire rhythm. You go from the old way of type wait, to dispatch, dispatch review. You go get a coffee while it works.
I want to zoom out a bit here because we have been talking a lot about the mechanics of this shift. Tokens, terminal commands. But there is a historical analogy Doris used that I think perfectly captures the magnitude of the moment we are in right now.
The printing press.
The printing press. Explain that comparison because it really reframes the fear people are feeling.
It does. Think about it this way. If you were a scribe in the 1400s, your entire value to society was your penmanship. You were the only one who could write code, which in this case was, painstakingly copying the Bible by hand.
And then the printing press gets invented. And to a scribe, that looked like an absolute apocalypse.
It looks like total job replacement. You're thinking, well, my life is over.
Yeah.
But Boris argues we are currently at the scribe stage of software development.
Right.
Right now, only a tiny percentage of the human population, maybe less than 1%, can actually write code.
They are the modern scribes.
Exactly.
So tools like Claude Code are the printing press in this analogy.
They are the mechanism that takes literacy from 1% to 70% over time. When the printing press arrived, scribes didn't all just die of starvation.
Yeah.
The demand for books absolutely exploded because they were suddenly cheap to make. The scribes moved up the value chain. They became editors. They became publishers, writers, bookbinders. They did higher level work.
So if you are a developer listening to this deep dive right now, and your professional pride is wrapped up in how well you know the exact syntax of, say, the Go language.
You are focusing on your penmanship.
Wow.
And the press is already here. There was that great anecdote in the interview about an engineer writing a back-end service in Go. They verified it worked perfectly, deployed it to production, and then freely admitted they still don't actually know the Go language.
That is true democratization. You don't need to know the grammar to write the novel anymore.
But, and here is the major friction point we have to address, if you don't know the grammar, how do you know the novel isn't full of lies? If we have all these autonomous agents running around paying parking tickets, accessing our hard drives, writing production code safety becomes the only thing that actually matters.
Boris talked about a layered approach to safety at Anthropic. And I was really glad he got technical here, because just saying, trust us, is not a valid strategy.
No, it's not, and they know that. They use 3 distinct safety layers. The first one is called mechanistic interpretability. And we should probably be clear on what this is, because it sounds like total buzzword soup.
It really does. It's basically an MRI for the AI model, right?
It's actually deeper than that. An MRI just shows you where the blood is flowing in a brain. Mechanistic interpretability attempts to map the specific artificial neurons and circuits that correspond to abstract concepts.
Concepts like deception.
Exactly. Deception, manipulation, bias. They are literally trying to catch the model thinking a lie before it actually outputs the lie to the user.
So if they see that deceptive circuit lighting up, they can effectively lobotomize that tendency at the neurological level.
Ideally, yes, that's the goal. Now, the second layer is standard evaluations, evils. This is basically testing the model in a lab setting, like a petri dish, giving it tricky prompts and seeing how it behaves.
But the third layer is the scary one, right? In the wild.
It is, because you cannot simulate the real world in a lab.
Yeah.
You can't simulate a random user trying to use the terminal to grow tomatoes. You have to put the model in the hands of real people to see how it breaks.
Which is why they release things like Cowork as a research preview. They need the data.
They need to see the latent demand in action. Boris calls this whole process a race to the top. It's not just about speed to market, it's about not letting the god escape the box in a bad way. They are even open sourcing their safety sandboxes, so the rest of the industry can build safe agents too.
It's a comforting thought, I guess, but it still relies on the idea that we can patch the holes faster than the models can find them.
And that is the eternal arms race of cybersecurity. It's never truly finished.
Before we wrap up, I really want to touch on the ending of that interview. Because after 45 minutes of talking about exponential speed, infinite tokens, and crushing the minutiae of engineering, Boris took this really hard left turn into philosophy.
The miso story.
Yeah, the miso story. They asked him, what do you do post-AGI? When the computer does literally everything better than us, what is left for Boris to do?
And his answer was brilliant. He didn't say, I'll merge my brain with the cloud.
No.
He said he wants to move to rural Japan and make miso.
Which is a very specific retirement plan?
It's specific, but it's deeply symbolic. Think about making miso. It is a biological, messy process. It takes time.
Right.
You cannot optimize the fermentation of soybeans. White miso takes months. Red miso takes years.
It is the absolute antithesis of the tech world. It's slow.
And that's his whole point. The miso philosophy suggests that when AI takes away the need to do things for efficiency, we will finally return to doing things for meaning.
We've spent this whole deep dive talking about removing the grunt work of coding, the environment setup, the syntax errors. But for some people, that struggle was actually the fun part. They liked the puzzle.
And Boris is suggesting that we will still struggle in the future, but we will get to choose our struggles.
Yeah.
We won't struggle with a frustrating compiler error because we have to in order to get paid.
Yeah.
We will struggle to ferment soybeans or paint a canvas or build a community because we inherently want to.
So the AI handles the how,
Yeah.
and we as humans are finally left with the why.
Exactly. The barrier to creation has completely collapsed. The technical cost of building software is rapidly approaching zero.
Which leaves us with a final, I think, pretty provocative question for everyone listening to this right now. If the title of software engineer is truly gone in a year.
And the only limit is your imagination.
Right. If anyone can build anything just by describing it to an agent in English.
Yeah.
What is the idea you have been sitting on?
You no longer have the excuse of, oh, I don't know how to code.
The agent knows how to code?
So what is actually worth building?
That is your homework. Go find something worth building. And hey, maybe try using plan mode on your next project, even if it's just paying a parking ticket, just to see what the scribe of the future really looks like. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
See you next time.